Hello, I'm Donna Scala along with my co-host Tiffany Ross. Welcome to A Time to Dream. Time to Dream is brought to you by Roaring Lambs Ministry, a ministry that wants to change the culture for Christ by equipping Christians to amplify their faith. So we teach folks how to adequately and effectively share their testimony of what God has done for them. We share stories like today's on A Time to Dream, and we also collect stories in writing for our Stories of Roaring Faith book collection. So welcome today to A Time to Dream. So have you ever wondered about God's plan for your life? Or maybe you wondered if God had a plan for your life. Or maybe you're just struggling with, am I making a difference in this world? Or maybe you want to make more of a difference. We're going to talk about all that and more with our guest today, Dr. John Tolson. Today, Dr. Tolson knows exactly what his purpose is, and he's living it out beautifully. But it wasn't always that way. With simple and poor roots, Dr. Tolson didn't know where this world would take him. But today, his calling is perfectly clear. He's the founder of The Gathering USA. He is husband to Punky, father to 2 grown children and 3 adorable grandchildren. He's a friend to many, but more importantly, he is a disciple maker. He started one of the first team chaplain programs in the NBA and served multiple sports teams, including the Houston Rockets, Houston Astros, Houston Oilers, Orlando Magic, and most recently, the Dallas Cowboys. Yay. Wow. He's authored several books, including Take a Knee, and most recently, and I think most importantly, The 4 Priorities. We'll talk about that book later, but welcome to A Time to Dream.
Great to be with you all.
So glad you're here. So if you don't mind, let's start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about your childhood years.
Well, that's seems like just yesterday, but it's a long time ago. Well, I was born in Ohio, and my mom and dad were divorced when I think I was around 2. And I never met my father. I've only seen one picture, actually have it at home. He was a good-looking man. He was a very good-looking man. But unfortunately, they didn't stay together, and I never had a chance to meet him. Stepfather came into my life when I was around 7, I think. And that was the very, very beginning. But so I didn't have a dad that was really engaged in my life. And it's interesting, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but what I've been doing now for 40-some years, primarily working with men, even not having a daddy has impacted me greatly on a positive way, and in a positive way, and as I have tried to not only be a great dad over the years, but also be able to help other men be great men, great fathers, great husbands, great influencers, wherever they are. So that was the early time of growing up, and my family moved to Florida when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. So I really call my home Florida. It's west coast of Florida, Bradenton, Sarasota, right below Tampa, west coast of Florida. And went to school there, went to how far do you want me to go?
That's good.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, John, I love that, God sees fit, even if we don't grow up in an ideal childhood.
Yeah.
He's so good to bring people into our lives that can help pour in and minister to us as children. And I know that happened with your uncle. Would you just share about him and what that was like for you?
Well, it's very interesting. My grandfather, because I lived with my mother's mom and dad for a few years until I was about 7. And my mom got remarried. And my granddad did not know the Lord. In fact, he'd come home many nights having had too much to drink, worked in a steel mill. I had 2 uncles, one that influenced me the most, which I'll talk about in a moment. He didn't know God from Donald Duck. He was totally out of it. But he took an interest in me. He was a great athlete, and he spent some time with me when I was very young, showing me how to shoot a basketball and throw a baseball, and little did I know how that was going to pay off in years to come. But again, it's interesting how the Lord even used a person that didn't know the Lord to impact my life in another dimension, in another way. And I'll always be grateful for my Uncle Denzel. Denzel was his name, and made a deep, deep, deep impact in terms of the sports, discipline, preparation, perseverance, practice. He just drilled those things into me at a very young age.
You know, that's one of the great things about heaven. We don't know the impact that we have on people. And I think when we get to heaven, there'll be people that we don't even think about that will come up to us, hopefully, and say nice things, and that we did have an impact on them.
And I think that's for all of us. I think all of us want to know that we haven't wasted our lives, that God somehow, some way has used us, and He wants to. And I think you're exactly right.
So you also had coaches that poured into your life as well. Would you share with us about that with sports and growing up and what that was like?
Yeah, well, what I think, just think back now, comes to my mind. When I was in the 3rd grade, I played baseball with this a little place called the Boys Club. I guess they're still around the country. And I remember my coach was named Pokey Johnson. He was a plump little guy, great smile on his face, extremely encouraging. And it's not so much that what he poured into me as far as anything to do with the faith, but he believed in me in terms of my ability. And I can still remember one of the best games I pitched, him coming up to me, giving me a big hug, saying how great I did. So he was one. And then I had another coach when I was in the 9th grade in high school, getting ready to go into high school. Then it was 10, 11, 12, 7, 8, 9. And I remember the coach calling team meeting one afternoon. We're at practice, and we're all sitting down, and he's talking to us, and he looked at me. I don't know why he said this at this point, but he said, I know John is going to make 1 out of every 2 shots. Well, that has stuck with me for years, and he had confidence. I believed I could make every shot, but he believed in me and said that before my peers, and people have no idea sometimes the words they say, do they?
Yes.
Either positively or negatively, that can have an impact.
Right.
So that had a great impact. But then I also look at college coaches I had, and the college coaches I have were not like the great coach John Wooden at UCLA, or the great coaches like Dean Smith at North Carolina, that built into their players principles for living, not just basketball principles. I didn't have that. I wish I would have had it, and I was so envious of folks that I knew that were under coaches like that. But as you all know, I'm sure, the power of a coach in the life of a young man or a woman is absolutely profound.
So true. And speaking of coaches, you in your youth were invited to a retreat where you were introduced to the best life coach ever and changed your life forever. Would you share with us, a young boy in your neighborhood invited you to a retreat, and share with us what that was like that weekend?
Well, I can never forget that, and never can forget him. A little bit of the story is, his name was Sherry Hadley. He was actually a classmate and asked me to go to this retreat. And I said, what's a retreat? I didn't know all the church lingo and language. And he said, well, a bunch of students are going. You'll know a lot of them. Half of our basketball team's going, a lot of kids at school and others. And it'll be like a 3 or 4 day deal over a weekend. We'll have plenty of time to play ball, good food. There's going to be some pretty girls there. I said, sign me up. Anyway, and so I went, never having been before. Every night they would have a speaker, and I sat in the back creating havoc, talking to my friends and there were probably 150 students in this room, and I didn't listen. I was just kind of there hanging out, waiting to get out of that meeting. So the last night, though, the man's name was Ernie Gilmore, and he had been a missionary to Brazil. He was a wrestler in college, and he's a man's man, and he started describing what Jesus did on the cross. Well, I'd never heard it like that. And he laid it out, and man, he could communicate. Whew. And he laid that out, and I didn't know how to describe it then, but obviously the Lord was taking his word, opening my heart at that point in my life, going into the 10th grade year in high school. And I heard it, and then when he said, this is how this thing works. You have to make a decision. And I asked Christ to come into my life. And I remember going back to the dorm or little room that night, the cabin, and the lights were out, and 8 or 10 guys in a room. The counselor, he said, well, let's go around the room. What happened tonight? And I remember the only thing I said, I asked Jesus to come into my life tonight. And I said, it was like I had a pack on my back and it was taken off. I'm not sure all of what that meant. I hadn't lived long enough to do too many bad things at that point. But it was like a pack had been taken off and I was free. Sherry Hadley, I'll zoom ahead just a bit. Sherry Hadley ended up not only being one of my best friends, but he was a straight A student. He was an All-American track star. And he was one of the most humble guys I've ever met, but a great athlete, excuse me, and a great mind, but most of all, my friend. And so I go to graduate school, and we'll talk about that later, and he goes into the armed services, and I get a phone call one day that Sherry Hadley had been killed. On his first assignment, he'd been taken out in Vietnam. And of course it was devastating. And then zooming up, a number of years later, quite a few years later, I'm in Washington, D.C. with a friend, and we're getting ready to go back to Reagan Airport, to go back to Orlando. And my friend said, have you ever been to the Vietnam Memorial? I said, never been there. He said, the cab driver pulled over. He said, we got plenty of time. We walked through a grassy area, came up. If you've been there, to the area where the register is and the wall and the walkways. And one of the things I've always said when I've told that story is nobody's laughing or cutting up or even talking when you're there. It's a very solemn deal. But anyway, I looked at the register. I said, wouldn't that be something that Sherry's name's on that wall? I had no idea. So I scrolled down, and all of a sudden, boom, there it was. So I walked down the walkway to the part of the wall where his name was supposed to be. I stopped and I start going down, and suddenly there it was. Sure did. Well, it's hard unless you've been through that to know the emotions and the memories and everything that came back at that moment. But the point of all that is this: you all don't know Sherry Hadley. Most people, when I tell that story, they don't know who Sherry Hadley is, but I know who he is. And that young man, at a young age, had the courage to ask me, going into the 10th grade in high school, go to this retreat, because he knew what the retreat was about. I didn't. And because of him and what he did through what God has allowed me to be a part of over the year, Sherry's impact goes on all over the place. Just one invite, one person encounters Christ, and all the rest has happened all these years. Never forget Sherry Hadley.
Yeah, what a domino effect, because you've affected so many lives for Christ as well.
Well, I certainly hope so. I hope so. I want to do that. Yeah.
So you're a young man, you go to this retreat, you pray to receive Jesus Christ, you're active in sports, and your buddies are starting to look into colleges, and nobody in your family had ever been to college.
Nobody.
And you didn't have the means to go, but your wise uncle kind of spoke with you and gave you some words and gave you a direction on how to get into college.
This is almost like it's made up.
Yeah.
This story is, and I have had a chance to talk to other students about this over the years and give them the assignment to do the same thing. But it was a Christmas time, my senior year in high school, and he came up to my room and he said, so have you had any scholarship offers yet? And I said, how do you get a scholarship offer? He said, well, your coaches ought to be helping you. And I said, well, we have a big football school, and I'm sure they're helping them, because a lot of these players will go on to play in college, but I'm not getting any help. What do I do? He said, you have a dictionary. What the heck does a dictionary have to do with going? So I went over and got my little paperback Webster's and gave it to him. He said, go downstairs, come back in 30 minutes, I'll have a plan. Now, my uncle was a manipulator, crazy guy. What in the world was he up to? So I come back in 30 minutes. In the back of the dictionary were all the colleges and universities listed in the country. He had gone through all of them, put 50 dots by 50 schools. And he started telling me about all these schools. I think he was making most of it up. But, and he was a great athlete. He played in high school, played in college. I mean, he was a tremendous athlete. So he knew a little bit about sports and college sports and all that. So anyway, he said, get out a piece of paper. We're going to write you a letter. Just write what I tell you to write. I said, yes, sir. My name's John Tolson. I go to Manatee High School in Bradenton, Florida. I'm a senior. I said, in baseball last year, my pitching record was. In basketball, I'm a forward and a guard, and I am averaging this many points this year. I'd like to come to your school. I'll need a scholarship. Signed, John Tolson. So he said, now write 50 of them.
Oh.
No typewriter.
Right.
So I get a pack of notebook paper, 3 rings,
Yes.
blue ink ballpoint pen, copy 50 of those, and cash in Coke bottles and Pepsi bottles, nickel a bottle, to get the stamps and the envelopes. About 2 weeks later, I put them in the mailbox, and I said, man, I'm glad I'm done with that. Never expecting anything. I mean, what coach or athletic director today would even read a piece of notebook paper scribbled down by somebody? I mean, they wouldn't even look at it.
Right.
It's so sophisticated today with game film and all this stuff. I had no references. I didn't even put my coach's name down. So anyway, so it comes now to the end of March, and I start getting some letters. There was a school up in Wisconsin said, we'll give you a half scholarship. Then a couple came back, big name schools, and they said, our roster's full, but if you're available next season, we'd like for you to try out. Finally, I get a note to go to South Carolina to a junior college to try out. This team had won the National Junior College Championship that year, and they were loaded with great players. So I get on a Trailways bus, go up, I try out, 8 hours back on the Trailways bus, and by the way, the coach said, we'd like to give you a scholarship. So I got 2 years, but I said, I gotta have 4 years. What if I get hurt, don't have a scholarship to finish up, what do I do? So now, we're going into May, school's about out, I'm about ready to graduate, baseball season's almost over, and I called my mom before I went to practice that day, and I said, Mom, did I get anything today? And she said, yeah, there's something here from Flagstaff, Arizona. So what's the name of the school? And she said, and now it's called Northern Arizona University, then it's called Arizona State College. And I said, I don't even remember writing them. So she opened it up, and this is what it said. It said, you have been granted a full 4-year scholarship, play basketball and baseball at Northern Arizona University. So that crazy uncle had a great plan, and somehow God used him as a non-believer once again, to take the next step in my life. The Lord was operating. I didn't see all that then. I didn't understand that. But looking back now, that's what was going on.
Yes. The Lord works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?
But you know, here's another thought
Yes.
just popped in my mind. One of the things, all that, and some other people in my life later, that I gleaned from them was, I had, over the years, I've kind of become a dreamer. I think outside the box. People say, you can't do that. I said, well, let me think about that and come up with 10 ways we can do that. And I've always wanted to be like that, but I think it started when I thought about, well, that was pretty creative. Take a dictionary and do all this stuff. And I think a lot of times, to me, of all people on the planet that ought to be most informed and most creative are people that are followers of Jesus.
Right.
Wow, that is so
Because
true.
we have
John.
no limits.
You got it.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And John, I think of how blessed your children and your grandchildren are. I'm just gleaning being here today. Thank you for coming.
Oh,
And
my
so,
pleasure.
in your introduction, we mentioned your adult children
Yep.
who are blessed to have you as their dad, and also Ruth Ann. I would love to hear about your life with her and the years you had with her.
Yeah, well, I remember I was going into I think I was just finished my first year in graduate school, and I was home in Florida, and I was working, my church in my hometown had asked me to work with the high school students. And I remember a buddy of mine, actually it was my second year, and a buddy of mine were pulling up to the office one day, and I saw this cute girl in the back. I said, "Who's that?" I said, that's Dr. Harris's daughter. I don't know Dr. Harris, but I wouldn't mind knowing her. So anyway, that's how we met.
Yes.
I took the move and called her, and we had a date, I think, that night. Went pretty fast. So anyway, we were married 30 years, and she was from Bradenton also. Her daddy was one of the first 9 doctors in Bradenton, Florida, and was a rock star, delivered over 3,500 babies. And
Wow.
this man was one of the most humble but gifted men I've ever met in my life. Dr. W, we called him W.W. Harris, Dubba Dubba. But anyway, we were married, and we're married for 30 years. Ruth Ann taught me so much. She taught me some of the finer things, little things that I need. I had some rough edges. For example, I was never taught to write thank you notes. She said, when somebody would give us a gift or do something at Christmas or whatever, she said, "You got to write your notes." So what's that? She said, you write. I said, well, can I just tell them? Nope, you got to write a note.
Yeah.
Well, my mom never taught me that. She wasn't raised that way. So I learned how to write notes. Now when she wrote, the people she would write notes to some of my buddies, they would save them. They were so great. I'm literally, they would save them.
Yeah.
And the ones I would write, I'd have 2 or 3 lines. She called them flashcards. She said, "That's all he's got." Thank you. Love, John. But anyway, so some of the finer things. I remember when I was in graduate school, we were married before my last year in graduate school in Atlanta. And we were, on the weekends, sometimes I'd go and be asked to preach someplace in some little church. And she'd go with me, we'd be driving, and on the way back, she would critique me. Well, one of the things we had to deal with, I didn't need to be critiqued right then. Give me 72 hours, and then help me understand what I could do better. Which I wanted that. I wanted to grow, but I was a little sensitive then. I didn't want it right after the chicken dinner we'd had driving back to Atlanta. But I remember she said one time, she said, "Now you've got to use your grammar correctly. One of these days, you may be in front of an audience, and these are going to be well-educated, intelligent people, and if you don't use your grammar correctly, your verbs correctly, that could be a barrier to getting your message through." And I said, "Well, I've just been myself." She said, "Well, you got to do better than that." So many little things like that. But Ruth Ann was the kind of gal, she almost came across kind of quiet until you really got to know her. But when she spoke, you listened. She had wisdom. She had the wisdom of the Father, but also she was kind of like her daddy. When Dr. Harris spoke, you listened to every word he said. Didn't say a lot, but when he said something, it was very insightful and very wise. So our 30 years together, I remember after she passed away in February of 1999, I did a talk about a month later to a class that I taught. And in fact, I still have those notes, and went on much more than I'm doing here about all the great benefits that I experienced through that wonderful relationship with her. But she was an amazing gal.
And I know you went through a difficult stretch before she passed. And you learned a lot about caregiving. So might you share
Oh,
more
no,
about
sure,
that?
I'll be glad to do that. Yeah, in 1995, I think it was in September, she had a stroke. And Ruth Ann had found out when she was about 28 years old that she was a diabetic. And the diabetes really started to take its toll on her. And so your blood vessels get thin, and she would always have to go in and get some stuff done, some work done on her, laser work on her eyes because a blood vessel would have popped. I mean, it was really a challenge for her. And so she had that stroke, 30 days, and later she learned to walk again. She didn't lose her speech, but she would explain to me after that stroke, she said, "If you cut my body right down the middle, everything on the left side is like somebody has a hot iron on it 24 hours a day, because the bleed had been near the thalamus part of the brain, and it was called thalamic syndrome. And the doctor explained to me it's kind of like a radio on static. So that's where you, through that process, the thalamus, you can tell whether something's hot or cold. Well, because it was thrown off, everything was hot. And she was taking medication, just trying to live through it. And it was just, I mean, the next 4 years were a nightmare. I mean, in the middle of the night, things would happen. I'd have to call 911, on and on and on. The stuff went until finally, at the end of January, I think it was the 31st, she had another stroke, and that was it. Yeah.
Well, John, that's so tough to go through, and you've been married for 30 years, and yet you still have the joy of knowing that you'll see her on the other side.
Yeah.
And she's with the Lord. There's no better place to be.
Well, there's no doubt about that.
But here you've been a widower for 2 years.
Yeah.
And in walks a gal, 43 years old, never been married, named Punky Leonard. And what a great name. So tell us about meeting Punky, and I don't even know if you were looking to be married.
Well, after about a year, my kids called and said, Dad, Mom wouldn't want you not to be open to get married again. And little did I know, not so much I learned years later, but Ruth Ann had a lunch, I'm not sure exactly the timing before she died, with a friend that she had discipled, a lady, and her name was Arden. And she told Arden, she said, John is not going to do well by himself. So I'm praying for his wife to come. She never told me that. But she was praying for the woman, if God had her, that he would show me who it was without her ever saying anything about it. We never even discussed that. So when they made that call, that kind of freed me up to be open to that. And so I started getting some casseroles and cakes brought to my house, and people would introduce me to people.
Hey, you're a good-looking guy, John.
Well, it's hard to be humble. Anyway, just kidding. So anyway, I remember going out on that first dinner. Actually, it was with a group, so that was good, but it was weird. You know, when you've been married 30 years, I mean, it's just weird. But I met some wonderful people, but I knew, I'm sure like they did too, in one dinner, whether I sensed there was something here that the Lord was calling me to, a person. So Fred Hall, my veterinarian, called, and his wife Sandy said, we've been holding somebody back on you. You've been holding somebody back? I thought you were my friend. Said her name's Punky. Said she's been in Hollywood. She's an actress. Said she's from Orlando. She's finished with that career now. She's working in a marketing group, I think, at that time in Orlando. And you need to meet her. I said, well, find out if it's okay if I call her, and you give me her number and I'll call her. So I called, and I remember the night, actually, I can't give you all the story now. This really is some funny stuff here. Wasn't funny at the moment, but actually I had a date with her on a Saturday night, and a lady that I had seen for a couple of times called that morning, and I wasn't going to see her anymore. She said, would you like to go to dinner and go to a movie? And I said, yes. So I canceled the date with Punky before I ever met her. Oh. And when Punky got the message, she knew about this other person. She said, yep, old girlfriend. That was the last time I saw the old girlfriend. That was it. So anyway, she was nice enough to go out with me the next Saturday. And when I asked her, how do I get to your house that night? She said, back out of your driveway. Go left. 3 houses, stop at the stop sign, take a left. I'm the second house on the right. Oh. She was literally in golf terms about a 9-iron from my house.
Wow.
So that's how we met.
Wow.
And we dated for a couple of years. And now we've been married 19 years, which is hard to believe. So one of my friends, I called one of my friends in Austin. And I said, David, I said, I'm getting married. And he knew Ruth Ann and loved Ruth Ann. And he said, now wait a minute. Wait just a minute. He said, we love Ruth Ann. And you were married for her for 30 years. Are you telling me you think God can give you 2 good women when somebody's never get 1 good one? I said, yeah, he can do that. Yeah, but anyway,
and
so
he
that's
did.
Huh?
And he did.
He did.
I know that Punky's a great Bible teacher.
Yeah.
I know she loves the Lord. She loves discipling women. She's an amazing lady.
Yeah.
And your ministry has certainly grown over the years. In 2011, you wrote a book, Take a Knee. And you had a foreword from Tony Romo and a challenge from Roger Staubach in that book. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Yeah, the way that book came, together was when I started working with the Cowboys, which was a great privilege. Don't like everything about pro sports or some negative things that I used to see back then and even now, but I went into it not just to be the chaplain for the Cowboys, but to make a difference in the lives of the players, the coaches, and other personnel that work with that organization. So when I did the first chapel, one of the players who was kind of one of the key guys that asked me to do this, and he said, can you come down to the end of the locker room? We're going to, before we got on the field, would you just have a prayer with us? And so I said, is it okay if I say something, like read a verse or take a minute? He said, sure, that's fine. He said, we've never done that before, we just have a prayer. So I went down and did that, and I started thinking, I said, well, why don't we open this up to the whole team? So the next game, I said, I had one of the fellows that worked with the team, I said, get the whole team together. So they got all together in a big circle, took one knee down, grabbed arms. I got in the middle of the circle and did about a 2-minute, boom, hopefully motivational thing. And that's how it started. So then after I did that for numerous years, I got an idea one day, well, why don't I put all those little talks together? Because I had notes that I kept. And so that's how it came about. Take a knee, and it's been amazing. And the book can be used by men and women anywhere, but I really wanted it and want it to be used with fathers, with their kids. And so we've got one beautiful story is a guy that works with Focus on the Family. I sent him a copy. Dale came into town probably 6 months after I sent him a book. And he said, thank you so much for that book. So my son and I are going through the book, and we made a deal. So after we go through, and they're only like a page and a half each, but we read them, we talk about them. And the deal is, he goes to work, I go to work, he goes to school, he thinks school is work, and we try to live out what the lesson is in that particular chapter. And so he came in one night, he said, Dad, we're reading the chapter on being a servant. There's a little boy at school, same grade as I'm in, 5th grade, 11 years old, and said he's got cancer, and they're trying to raise money for the special treatment. So if I raise some money, put it in the pot, will that be serving? He said, fantastic. So he raised a bunch of money. I said, Dale, let me see, you have a picture of your son. So you open up his phone, and here's this kid, big, beautiful blue eyes, great smile on his face, and didn't have a hair on his head. I said, what's that about? He said, well, he did it on his own. His buddy at school lost all of his hair because of the cancer, and he just wanted to encourage and identify with his buddy at school. I said, Dale, do you know how that happened? Because you, as a father, were willing to take a time to be with your son and take a knee with him. He'll never forget that. And most fathers, if you have read the studies, don't spend that kind of time with their kids in our country. It's life-changing.
And I know that book is available on Amazon.
Yeah.
And
Well, actually, probably better for our website.
good.
Be better to come to our website, yeah.
which is the
TolsonGroup.com.
TolsonGroup.com.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I know the book that had a great impact on me is The 4 Priorities. You can see it right here in front of John, and it's really a practical toolkit for disciples and disciple makers. It talks about prioritizing your life with Christ, your life with yourself, the relationships that you have, and your relationship with the world. So I would love for you to take a few minutes and just give us more insight into the 4 priorities.
Yeah. Well, kind of, years ago, probably, I would say all the way back to the middle 70s, didn't have a book, but I had the concept of those priorities, which all come from Matthew chapter 22, 37 to 39, where Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And for years, I had tried to live by the priorities that came out of that. And at that time, I really just focused on 3. I really didn't think of the 4th, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. 3 of those priorities. But so when where the book came from, when I was getting ready to move to Dallas back in 2004, the work I was going to do in Dallas and based out of here was discipling people who would disciple people. And I kept wondering, what is it that I need to put together that would be kind of like the roadmap or the manual to help the average person be able to disciple somebody else? And I kept going back to these priorities. And so basically I took all the notes that I had in my file cabinets and we put this little book together. That's how it came together. But here are the 4 priorities. The first one is what I call a personal, progressive commitment to Jesus Christ. And it's the number 1 priority. And the number 1 priority, your commitment to Christ, we believe, is going to impact the other 3 priorities, which I'll unpack in a moment. So it's a personal commitment to Jesus Christ. Make sure you've got it. Make sure you maintain it and keep that thing sizzling in your life. Number 1. And I was talking to somebody the other day that had gone to a seminary to study to go into the ministry. And the seminary is a very, very well-known seminary. And they said, the problem is, from their point of view, having gone to seminary, they said so many people come and get all the academics, but they lose their passion for Jesus. It's not that they don't love him and know him, but very few then go to their churches or go to the mission field or go to do whatever they do and lead people to Christ and really stay close to him.
Yes.
They get involved with all the stuff that churches put on the pastor or pastor puts on himself, and that flame flickers a little bit. So the first commitment is commitment to Christ. Second one, and this is the one I had left out for years until I really saw the impact of this. He says, love, the number 1 commandment is love the Lord. The second commandment, he says, like unto the first, you love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love your neighbor, how? As. It's a simile, like or as you love yourself. So the thesis behind the second priority, which is a personal commitment to loving yourself, is you will only be able to love somebody else to the degree you love yourself, and you'll only be able to love yourself to the degree you know how much God loves you. And there, as you all know, there is an epidemic today in our country of people not understanding their value, their worth, their significance, all kinds of terms, their self-esteem, all of it. And this is not just love yourself, it's all about me. Some people mistake that. This is not about that. It's understanding my value, my worth, based upon what he thinks about me. So that's a big one for us, really big. And that will impact a person's ability to live out relationships in 3 and 4 priority. The third priority is a personal commitment to the body of Christ, other believers, which will include your marriage, your children, and other believers. And so that is a critical phase of the priorities, because now it gets out where the rubber meets the road in real life. Your family, other believers. And you know, I was talking to somebody the other day, because this talk that I'm going to get ready to give, are Christians destroying America? One of the things is I think many Christians destroy each other. They talk about each other, put each other down. You look on the social media, you can't say anything without somebody taking it out of context or saying something negative. And you know, that's absolutely the opposite of what Jesus said. We're supposed to love one another. There are going to be differences, but agree to disagree agreeably and do it in a way that's not going to reflect poorly on the Lord, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a critical priority. It's a relational thing with other people that know Christ. In fact, I'll make a point there. Years ago, I studied under a man in Switzerland named Francis Schaeffer. And Schaeffer always said that that if you go to John 17, where Jesus was talking to his disciples, and he said, and he was praying for them then and now. He said, I pray that they would be one. I pray that, he repeats it 3 times, Why? So that the non-believer in your community would know that Jesus Christ was who he claimed to be and come to know him. And so then Schaeffer would say this, that the non-believer in your city has a biblical right to say that Jesus Christ is not the Son of God if they do not see a visible oneness among believers. They have a right to write it off and say there's nothing to it.
Wow.
So when I'm talking and teaching on that, I always tell, if it's a group of people that are followers of Jesus, if you got a relationship that's not right with somebody that's a believer, go get it right. There's more to this than just about how you feel or where you've been hurt. Get it right. We got to do it. There's too much at stake.
Yes.
So that's the third one. The fourth priority is a personal progressive commitment to the work of Christ in the world. Two-pronged approach. One, the evangelistic side. That means delivering, pointing people to the person of Jesus, who he was, what he did, why he did it, why we need it, how I get it. And to be able to do that in ways that are winsome, that are clear, articulate, and point people to him. And then also the compassion side, caring for the whole person. And it's interesting when you look up the definitions of the word salvation, one of the definitions of salvation is wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
So when Christ comes in, you just don't get your ticket punched so you can go to heaven. He wants you to become a whole person, physically, mentally, socially, emotionally, and obviously spiritually. That's priority number 2. All those things I just mentioned. So it pushes us towards not balanced living, although it will yield that. It pushes us toward priority living.
Right. You know, and that's one reason that we do A Time to Dream. We want to show others how real Jesus is in your life.
Sure.
And after listening to you, I mean, no one can doubt that you have a personal relationship with the Son of God. And we feel like when we tell our stories of what we've seen God do in our lives, it's the best way to really show how real God is.
Well, can I comment on that?
Please.
So, you know, we're living in a day and time, and you might have read the recent study that came out through Lifeway and through Legionnaire Ministry, R.C. Sproul's work. Now he's with the Lord, but out of Orlando. But the study said that in America, 50% of the people, 30% of the, quote, evangelicals are people that believe the Bible, they believe Jesus was the Son of God, etc., the basics of the faith, say they believe Jesus was a great teacher, but not the Son of God. That just came out. So that's the climate that we're living in the United States of America right now. So you can go through all the different proofs and things we lay out about the authority of Christ, the authenticity of Christ, and all the rest of it. But you cannot argue away a changed life.
Right, exactly.
Can't argue it away.
That is so true, and you are a man on a mission. I love it, and I believe many people can be impacted and encouraged and inspired by Tolson Group. You and Punky have developed this, and they can find teachings online and all of that. So share with our listeners briefly about Tolson Group and how they can follow you.
Well, the Tolson Group basically is just a covering.
Yeah.
It's a covering for the work that we do. And through it, our basic purpose is to make disciples who make disciples. Matthew 28, Jesus said, "Go therefore into all the world and make disciples." And those words were not a suggestion from Christ. They were a command by Christ to every believer. And so when I hear people say that know Christ, oh, I believe the Bible and I believe every word of it. Well, let's go to Matthew 28. Do you believe that? Or are you doing that? Believing it and doing it are two different things. To show that I believe it, I got to be doing it. But the problem is, most people in our country that are Christians have never been discipled. They've gotten tons of good information, perhaps, great Bible teaching, perhaps, but no one has come alongside them to pour a faith foundation into their life that they could live by and build on the rest of their life, and done it in such a way that that person then is committed and confident that they then can do that with somebody else, who will then do it with somebody else, and that's their lifestyle. It's not a program, it's a lifestyle. So our primary mission is to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples, and we believe that is the way, that was God's plan to change the planet.
So John, here we are. I'm going to give another sports analogy. We've been talking about sports. Bases are loaded. You're at bat. Would you bring it on home for our listeners? What final thought would you like to share with our listeners today?
Wow. Well, I'm glad you said that. You asked me to do that. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I think I was meeting with a man not too long ago, and he was an atheist. He had flown in from Charlottesville, North Carolina, or excuse me, Virginia, and he was a hurting puppy, 70 years old, had cancer, and so this is basically what I laid out to him. I said, Bob, do you like football? He said, oh, I love football. So we talked about football for a moment. I said, how many downs in football? He said, well, 4 downs. To make a first down, you got to go 10 yards, and you got 4 downs to do that. I said, okay, think about this. Number one, God looked down. And when God looked down, he saw the mess that we were in. He saw people going their own way and doing what they wanted to do. God could have, the Bible says, could have turned his back and said, I'm done with them. But he didn't. And that goes to the second down. The second down is Jesus came down. God's plan was he put skin on, came to this planet, walked on this earth for 33 years, healed people, fed people, encouraged people, challenged people, 33 years on the planet. But that's not all he did. That goes to the third down. The third down, he laid down his life on the cross. Why did he do that, Bob? He did that so that the very problem that you and I have, that all of us have, which is we've rebelled against God. We've done what we want to do and not him, what he wants us to do. We have offended him, and therefore we got a problem. Oil and water don't mix. Sin and perfection and holiness don't mix. We got to get the sin problem removed. And I said, Bob, the scripture says in Romans 6:23 that the wages of sin is death. There's a penalty, there's a wage. And so why he died on that cross was to take on himself what I was due, the wages, the penalty. But I said, that's still not all, Bob. I said, that's information, those are facts. You might know them, maybe not know them. But the fourth down is really big. The fourth down is every knee must bow down. There comes that point in our life where we've got to be willing to say, Uncle, I give up. And say, Lord, I can't make it to you. I can never be good enough to get to you. Thank you for what you've done for me. I want you to come into my life, and I want you to clean me up. And from this day forward, I want you to help me to become the person you've always wanted me to be. So I guess my challenge will be to everybody that if that's you and you're not sure or confident, or you're quite sure maybe, that Christ is not in your life, all you got to do is what Bob did. Lord, come in, clean me up. Help me to become, from this day forward, the man or the woman you always want me to be. And let me tell you something. I've never met a man or a woman in all my lifetime who's asked Jesus to come into their lives that's ever been disappointed or been the same. So I hope you'll do that.
We do too. We hope that even right now, take a moment right now, you're never closer to praying to receive Jesus Christ than you are right now. You've heard the message. You've heard it clearly. Take the moment right now, bow your knee, and invite Jesus Christ into your life. And then go tell somebody. Go tell somebody. Make it real. Be undeniable about it. In fact, we'd love to hear from you. If you've prayed that prayer right now and you've bowed your knee and asked God to come into your life, we'd love to hear from you. And I know Dr. John Tolson would also love to hear from you. You can email him at info@thetolsongroup.com. You can call us at 972-380-0123. We'll answer and we'll pray with you. Or you can email us at atimetodream@gmail.com. But you are closer right now to making a decision that will change your life not only forever, but for all eternity. And so we encourage you to do it. And we encourage you to share this show with others. Maybe you have a relationship with Christ, but maybe because of listening to Dr. Tolson today, you want to be more about making disciples. Share this show with them, and that will be a great first step. Or contact Dr. Tolson and he'll work with you to help you be a disciple maker. It's the most important job we can have, isn't it?
Would you say your phone number again one more time for the
Sure.
people?
It's 972-380-0123.
123, isn't that great? I love it. That's my kind of number right there. I remember that.
Anyway, you've been watching and listening to A Time to Dream. Come back and see us next week. And if you have a story to tell, we'd love to hear from you. Be blessed. Have a great week. Keep dreaming, and may God richly bless you.
That's great.